am Judy, 32 years old, trembling with rage as I watch my mother-in-law, Eleanor, rearrange my dream kitchen while wearing my favorite blouse, the one I saved 3 paychecks to buy. The marble countertops I designed myself are now covered with her tacky decorations. "We are staying indefinitely," she announces with that smirk I have grown to despise. My husband, Aaron, stands there, betraying me with his silence. After 5 days of this torment, I disappeared without a word. Nobody expected what arrived at their doorstep next. The neighbors still talk about it. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And be sure to like and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when family crosses the line. I grew up in a middle-class family in Chicago, the kind where you never had quite enough, but never went without necessities either. My parents worked hard to provide for me and my younger sister, instilling in us the value of independence and perseverance. From an early age, I developed a fascination with architecture and design. I would spend hours sketching floor plans of my dream home on graph paper, imagining every detail from the wraparound porch to the bay windows in the reading nook. After graduating with my architecture degree, I spent 10 years working my way up at a respected firm in the city. I started as an assistant making coffee runs and organizing blueprints, but eventually earned my place as a project manager for residential developments. Every day I helped others create their dream homes while quietly saving for my own. I have always been independent, someone who treasures her personal space. My apartment during those years was my sanctuary, meticulously organized with everything in its place. Friends often commented on how my space felt both stylish and comforting, reflecting my personality in every carefully chosen detail. Then I met Aaron at an architecture exhibition downtown. He was there representing his engineering firm, and we bonded over our shared appreciation for sustainable building practices. What struck me most about Aaron was how respectful he seemed of my opinions and space. During our 2 years of dating, he never pushed boundaries or made me feel like my independence was threatened. Our wedding was small, just 50 guests at a renovated industrial space I had helped design. Aaron had mentioned his parents were traditional and might find our wedding unconventional, so I was not surprised when only a handful of his family members attended. I met his parents, Eleanor and Harold, briefly at the ceremony. They seemed polite, if a bit distant, complimenting the venue but leaving early with vague excuses about a long drive home. Over the first 3 years of our marriage, we only saw them on major holidays. These visits were always at their home, a sprawling colonial-style house in the suburbs that Eleanor kept immaculately clean and decorated with family heirlooms and antiques. During these visits, I noticed how Aaron would become quieter, more deferential to his parents' opinions. But these interactions were brief enough that I never worried too much about it. All the while, Aaron and I were saving for our dream home. I had been putting aside money for 8 years before we even met, and together we continued to build our house fund. We lived in a modest apartment, drove used cars, and limited our vacations to weekend getaways within driving distance. Every sacrifice felt worth it as our savings grew. The house hunting process took a full year. I had a very specific vision and was unwilling to compromise on certain features. Aaron was patient, accompanying me to dozens of open houses every weekend. When we finally found the Victorian house with good bones and the right location, I knew immediately it was the one. The previous owners had already renovated the plumbing and electrical systems, but the interior needed updating to match my vision. The day we got the keys, I cried. After all those years of dreaming and saving, I was standing in my own home. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of renovation projects. I designed each room personally, working with contractors to bring my vision to life. The kitchen was my masterpiece, with custom cabinets in a soft blue-gray, marble countertops, a farmhouse sink, and high-end appliances. I spent weeks selecting the perfect pendant lights to hang over the island, and the backsplash tiles were imported from Italy. Our bedroom became a retreat with plush carpeting, a king-sized bed, and blackout curtains for the mornings Aaron wanted to sleep in. The guest bedroom was comfortable but simple, as we rarely had overnight visitors. My home office was set up with built-in bookshelves and a large desk overlooking the backyard garden, where I could work on freelance projects in the evenings and weekends. Speaking of the garden, I invested significant time and money transforming the backyard. I planted roses, hydrangeas, and a small herb garden near the kitchen. We added a stone patio with comfortable outdoor furniture where we could enjoy morning coffee or evening wine. The first 6 months in our new home were blissful. Aaron and I established comforting routines. On weeknights, we would cook dinner together in our dream kitchen, talking about our days while jazz played softly in the background. Weekends were for gardening, small improvement projects, and hosting occasional dinner parties for close friends. We talked about starting a family in a year or two, once we had fully settled into the house and rebuilt our savings after the renovation expenses. I had already mentally designated one of the spare bedrooms as a future nursery, though I kept this to myself, not wanting to jinx our plans. We developed friendships with several neighbors, particularly Laura and James next door, a couple around our age who often joined us for impromptu barbecues or game nights. Our neighborhood was exactly what we had hoped for, a mix of young professionals and established families with tree-lined streets and a strong community feel. Despite being just 20 minutes from downtown, everything felt perfect, like all our hard work and sacrifices had finally paid off. Our home was our sanctuary, a physical manifestation of our love and shared dreams. I had no idea how quickly it could all be threatened. It was a Friday evening in October when everything changed. Aaron and I were preparing a special dinner to celebrate his recent promotion. I was chopping vegetables when his phone rang. He stepped into the living room to take the call, but I could hear his voice rising in what sounded like surprise. When he returned to the kitchen, his expression was tense. "That was my dad," he said, setting his phone on the counter. "They sold their house. They sold it. I thought they loved that place." I replied, surprised, since Eleanor had always been so proud of their home. Apparently, they had received an offer they could not refuse. "But here's the thing," Aaron hesitated, not meeting my eyes. "They need a place to stay while they figure out their next move." I told them they could stay with us for a couple of weeks. My knife paused mid-chop. "You told them yes without asking me first?" "They are my parents, Judy." What was I supposed to say? "They need help." What Aaron had described as a couple of weeks and a small suitcase each turned into something entirely different when Eleanor and Harold arrived Sunday afternoon. They pulled up in their luxury SUV with 8 large suitcases, plus several boxes of what Eleanor called essentials. Aaron helped carry everything in while I stood in the doorway, a forced smile plastered on my face. "What a charming little house," Eleanor said as she stepped inside, her gaze sweeping critically over our carefully designed living room, though these curtains do nothing for the space. "We had silk damask in our formal living room, you know." Harold grunted as he set down a heavy box. "The yard needs work. Those shrubs are planted all wrong. I can fix that for you while we're here." Within an hour of their arrival, Eleanor was opening kitchen cabinets and drawers, commenting on my organization system. "Oh dear, you have your glasses stored so inefficiently. Let me show you how we did it in our home." Before I could protest, she was rearranging my meticulously organized cabinets, placing everyday items on high shelves I could barely reach without a step stool. When I tried to interject, she waved me off with, "Trust me, I have been managing a household since before you were born." Harold, meanwhile, had commandeered the living room, adjusting the thermostat up 5 degrees because "it's freezing in here," and changing the television to a sports channel at maximum volume. When I mentioned that Aaron and I usually kept the house cooler because of energy costs, he laughed and said, "Son, you need to make more money so your wife doesn't have to pinch pennies on comfort." Aaron had told them they would be staying in the guest room, but Eleanor peeked into our master bedroom and said, "This will be perfect for us. The guest room is much too small for 2 people long term." "Long term?" I asked, alarm bells ringing in my head. "I thought you were just staying a couple of weeks while you look for a new place." Eleanor and Harold exchanged a look I could not interpret. Aaron quickly interjected, "Let's get you settled in the guest room. I'm sure we can make it comfortable for you." That first night, I confronted Aaron in our bathroom, keeping my voice low so his parents would not hear. "You said a couple of weeks. Why did your mom say long term? And why are they acting like they own our house?" "They are just settling in," Aaron defended. "Dad is stressed about the move, and you know how mom gets when she's anxious. They will adjust." But they did not adjust. Instead, Aaron and I were the ones forced to adapt. By day 3, Eleanor had rearranged not just the kitchen but also the living room furniture, claiming the new arrangement opened up the energy flow. Harold had reprogrammed our television remote, installed a satellite dish without asking, and invited 2 of his friends over for drinks on our patio. I tried to establish some boundaries. "Eleanor, I really prefer the kitchen to stay organized my way since I do most of the cooking." She patted my hand condescendingly. "Oh, sweetie, I'll be taking over the cooking now that we're here. Aaron tells me how busy you are with work, and a man needs proper home-cooked meals." When I looked to Aaron for support, he shrugged apologetically but said nothing. That night, Eleanor served an elaborate meal that included a roast requiring hours of preparation, using ingredients I had been saving for a special recipe she had not asked before, using my expensive saffron and imported olive oil. "This is how a proper family dinner should be," she announced as we sat down. Aaron grew up with meals like this every night. The most alarming change came on day 4 when I returned from work to find my home office had been converted into what Harold called his command center. My desk had been pushed against the wall, my carefully organized project files stacked haphazardly in a corner, and his massive desktop computer with multiple monitors now dominated the space. Had to get set up properly, he explained without looking up from his screen. Can't be expected to manage my investments on a laptop. When I asked where I was supposed to work on my freelance projects, Eleanor suggested the kitchen table when it wasn't being used for meals. I stood in the doorway of what had been my private workspace, fighting back tears of frustration. That evening, I overheard Eleanor on the phone with someone discussing how they were getting settled in our new living arrangement. And Aaron is so happy to have us close by now. The way she said it made it sound permanent, not temporary. Then came the dinner on day 5 that pushed me over the edge. I came home exhausted after a difficult day at work to find Eleanor wearing my favorite cashmere sweater, the one Aaron had given me for my birthday. She was stirring something on the stove in my designer kitchen, which now bore little resemblance to the space I had created. Harold and Aaron sat at the island drinking beer and laughing about something. None of them seemed to notice my arrival. At first, I stood in the archway, taking in the scene of these invaders who had so quickly colonized my sanctuary. "Oh, Judy, there you are." Eleanor finally noticed me. "I hope you don't mind, but I borrowed this sweater. Mine are still packed away, and it was a bit chilly today." Before I could respond, Harold cleared his throat and said, "Eleanor, now is as good a time as any to tell them." Aaron sat up straighter, and I noticed a flash of something in his eyes. Knowledge. He already knew whatever they were about to say. Eleanor turned down the burner and faced me with what I can only describe as a triumphant smile. "We have been thinking about our situation, and we've decided that the most sensible solution is for us to stay here indefinitely." I repeated, my voice barely audible. "Indefinitely?" "We sold our house because we needed to liquidate our assets," Harold explained. "Made some investments that didn't pan out. At our age, starting over with a mortgage doesn't make sense. And Aaron agrees that families should stick together," Eleanor added, shooting a look at her son. I turned to Aaron, waiting for him to contradict them, to remind them this was supposed to be temporary. Instead, he stared down at his beer bottle and said nothing. In that moment of silence, I felt a betrayal so deep it took my breath away. The morning after the indefinitely announcement, I woke up early and went to my closet to get dressed for work. Several of my favorite pieces were missing, including an expensive silk blouse I had splurged on after landing a major client. I found Eleanor in the kitchen wearing not just my blouse but also my designer jeans, which she had somehow taken in at the waist. "Oh, good morning, dear," she said cheerfully. "Hope you don't mind, but my clothes are simply not suitable for this casual lifestyle you and Aaron have. I'll take good care of them." She had not asked. She had not even mentioned she would be borrowing them. She had simply taken what she wanted, as if my possessions were community property now that she lived here. Later that day, I discovered Harold had not only taken over my office but had also changed the Wi-Fi password, for security reasons, and failed to share the new one with me. When I asked Aaron about it that evening, he seemed uncomfortable, but defended his father. "Dad is just being cautious. You know, he used to work in IT before he retired. He's worried about hackers." "But it's our Wi-Fi. Aaron, I need the password for my work. And why is your mother going through my closet without asking?" Instead of addressing my concerns, Aaron turned defensive. "They are adjusting to a difficult situation, Judy. They lost their home, their independence. Can't you be a little more understanding? They're older and set in their ways." "And what about our ways? This is our home that we worked for years to buy. Doesn't that matter?" Aaron's face hardened. "They are my parents. They raised me, sacrificed for me. Now they need our help, and you're acting like they're invading your precious space." "Because they are," I exclaimed, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Your mother is wearing my clothes without asking. Your father took over my office and changed our security system. They rearranged our entire kitchen and living room. That is the definition of invasion." Aaron stood up and grabbed his keys. "I'm going out. I can't talk to you when you're being selfish like this." He left me standing alone in what no longer felt like my own kitchen. As I leaned against the counter, trying to process what was happening, Eleanor appeared in the doorway. "Marriage requires compromise, dear," she said with false sympathy. "Aaron has always been a family boy. Surely you knew that when you married him." The next day, I came home to find Eleanor had invited her bridge club over for elderly women sat in my living room drinking from my special occasion teacups, eating cookies served on my grandmother's antique plates that I kept carefully stored for sentimental reasons. "Ladies, this is Aaron's wife," Eleanor introduced me. As if I were an afterthought in my own home. "She works so much we hardly see her." One woman looked at me with pity. "It must be hard balancing a career with keeping a home. In my day, we knew our priorities." Another added, "Eleanor has been telling us how she's had to step in to help around the house. Such a blessing for a busy young woman to have." an experienced homemaker around. I excused myself before I could say something I would regret. In our bedroom, I found that Harold had moved our television to their room because the game was on, and Aaron said it would be fine. Our bedroom now felt smaller, emptier, yet another space violated. The financial intrusion began subtly. First, it was Harold mentioning casually over dinner that he had borrowed money from Aaron for some investment opportunity. Then it was Eleanor. Returning from shopping with bags from expensive stores, purchases made with what I later discovered was our joint credit card. When I confronted Aaron about the charges, his response stunned me. They need some things to feel comfortable. Here. Dad is going to pay us back once his investment pays off. What investment, and how much have you given them without discussing it with me first? Aaron looked guilty but defensive. They are family, Judy. They've helped me out my whole life. Now it's my turn. How much, Aaron? After some pressing, he admitted he had been giving his parents money for years, even before they moved in. Small amounts at first, but increasing over time as their financial situation deteriorated. The recent investment was $15,000 from our joint savings, the money we had been setting aside for having a baby. We can save again, he insisted when he saw my shock. Dad says this opportunity could double our money. The same dad who had just admitted to making failed investments that forced them to sell their house, the violations of my space, my possessions, and now our financial future continued to escalate. Harold began smoking cigars on our back patio. Despite my asthma and our house rule of no smoking. When I mentioned it to Aaron, he suggested, stay inside if the smoke bothers you. Eleanor criticized my cooking, my cleaning, my decorating choices, all within earshot of friends or neighbors, positioning herself as the savior who had arrived just in time to fix her son's domestic situation. Aaron was always used to a higher standard at home, she would say, with a meaningful look in my direction. The breaking point came exactly 2 weeks after they moved in. I came home early from work with a migraine to find Eleanor had completely reorganized my kitchen. The special chef's knives my culinary school friend had given us as a wedding present were gone, replaced with Eleanor's old set from the 80s. My collected cookbooks had been boxed up and moved to the garage to make room for Eleanor's China dog collection on the shelves. When I asked where my things were, Eleanor waved dismissively. I donated those old knives to the church rummage sale. They were taking up too much counter space with that block thing, and those cookbooks were just gathering dust. No one uses books for recipes anymore, dear. Everything is online now. I stood frozen in place, unable to process that she had given away my personal belongings without asking, items with both monetary and sentimental value, gone because she decided they were unnecessary. While I was still reeling from this discovery, Harold proudly showed me the improvement he had made to our living room, a 70-inch television mounted on the wall where my favorite painting had hung. The wall was now damaged with multiple drill holes from his trial-and-error mounting process, and cables hung visibly down to the power outlet. Had to get a proper television in here, he explained. That little 36-inch thing you had was practically unwatchable. Aaron and I split the cost. More money spent without my knowledge or consent. More permanent changes to our home made unilaterally. I found Aaron in the garage and confronted him about both situations. You let your mother give away my professional knives, and you helped your dad buy a television we do not need without discussing it with me first. Aaron looked uncomfortable but stood his ground. Mom thought she was helping organize things, and she didn't realize the knives were special. As for the television, Dad and I watch a lot of sports together now. It's nice having him around for that. This is not about knives or televisions, Aaron. This is about respect and boundaries. Your parents are taking over our home, spending our money, and you are letting them. They are family, he repeated, the phrase that had become his mantra. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I discovered the final straw. On our shared laptop, I found an open browser tab showing a local home renovation company's website. In the email draft was a message from Harold to the company discussing plans to convert our back garden into an outdoor entertainment space with a built-in grill, television, and wet bar. The estimated cost was nearly $30,000, money we simply did not have unless we drained our savings completely. Another tab showed Eleanor had been researching how to legally establish residence in a property, with notes about tenant rights in our state. They were not just staying indefinitely. They were planning to establish legal rights to our home. The next morning, I asked Aaron to meet me for lunch away from the house and his parents. We met at a small cafe downtown, neutral territory, where I hoped we could have an honest conversation. Without interruption. We need to talk about your parents and set some boundaries, I began once we had ordered. This situation is not working for me, Aaron. They are taking over our home, our finances, and our lives. Aaron fidgeted with his napkin, not meeting my eyes. They are going through a rough time, Judy. We need to be supportive. Being supportive does not mean letting them take over everything. We need to set a timeline for how long they will stay and establish some ground rules while they are with us. Aaron was quiet for a long moment, then finally looked up. They do not have a timeline, Judy. They cannot afford another place. What do you mean they cannot afford another place? They just sold their house. Where did that money go? He sighed heavily. They were in more financial trouble than I realized. Dad made some bad investments, and they had a second mortgage on the house. The sale barely covered their debts. They have their social security, but it's not enough to rent anything decent in this area. I felt a cold dread spreading through me. How long have you known about this? Aaron's silence was answer enough. You knew before they moved in, didn't you? You knew this was never going to be temporary. He nodded slowly. I could not turn my back on them, Judy. They have nowhere else to go. So, you lied to me instead. You let me think this was a temporary situation when you knew all along they planned to stay permanently. I thought once you got used to having them around, it wouldn't be such a big deal, he admitted. They're actually thinking about converting the guest room into a small apartment for themselves. Dad found a contractor who could add a kitchenette and expand the bathroom. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. You have been planning construction on our house without even talking to me about it. This is my home too, Aaron. A home I worked for years to afford. It is our home, he corrected. And they are my parents. Family takes care of family. And what about me? Am I not your family too? Do my feelings not matter at all in this? Aaron's expression hardened. I did not want it to come to this. But if you cannot accept my parents, then maybe we need to rethink our marriage. They need me, Judy. I sat back, stunned by the ultimatum. Are you seriously choosing your parents over our marriage right now? I am asking you to be more understanding and compassionate. They have nowhere else to go, and I will not put my elderly parents out on the street because you're possessive about your kitchen arrangement. His dismissal of my concerns as trivial was the final insult. This was not about kitchen arrangements or borrowed clothes. This was about respect, partnership, and the future we had planned together being dismantled without my consent. As we drove back to the house in separate cars, I noticed Eleanor watching from the living room window. When we entered, she was arranging flowers in a vase, but the satisfied smile she tried to hide told me she knew exactly what had happened. She had won. In the days that followed, Harold became bolder with his renovation plans. I found him in the backyard one afternoon, marking areas with spray paint and taking measurements. When I asked what he was doing, he proudly showed me elaborate drawings for a complete backyard renovation, including a built-in barbecue, outdoor kitchen, and pergola. Going to make this place really livable, he explained. Never understood these minimalist yards you young people like. A proper home needs entertainment space. Harold, we cannot afford a renovation like this right now, I tried to explain. And we were saving that space for a play area eventually. He waved off my concerns. Aaron and I discussed it. We are going to use some of your home equity. Property values in this neighborhood are strong, so it makes sense to invest back into the house. They were planning to take out a loan against our house, a house that had been my dream for so long, to fund renovations I did not want or approve of. When I tried to discuss this with Aaron that evening, he avoided the conversation, saying he was too tired from work and would talk about it later. Later never came. That night, I lay awake beside Aaron, feeling like a stranger in my own bed, in my own home. I realized with painful clarity that this was no longer a situation that could be resolved with better boundaries or clearer communication. Aaron had made his choice, and it was not me. I slipped out of bed and went to the guest bathroom, the only space in the house that still felt somewhat mine since Eleanor and Harold rarely used it. I called my best friend Nicole despite the late hour. They are planning to take out a home equity loan to renovate the backyard, I whispered into the phone. Aaron gave me an ultimatum today. Either I accept his parents living with us permanently or our marriage is over. Nicole was silent for a moment before asking, whose name is on the house, Judy? Both of ours. But I put down most of the down payment from my savings before we were married. You need to talk to a lawyer, Nicole said firmly. Tomorrow, before they can take out any loans or establish residency rights. The next morning, I called in sick to work and met with Sarah, a family law attorney Nicole had recommended. I brought all our financial documents, including the mortgage papers, bank statements, and records of my premarital savings that went into the house. Based on what you've told me, you have several options, Sarah explained after reviewing everything. Since you contributed the majority of the down payment with funds you had before marriage, you have a strong claim to the house in case of divorce. However, your in-laws could potentially establish tenant rights if they stay long enough, which could complicate matters. What about the loans they are planning to take out against the house? Your husband cannot legally Take out a home equity loan without your signature since you are both on the deed. If he tries to forge your signature, that would be fraud. Sarah helped me understand my rights and the steps I could take to protect myself and my home. I left her office with a clear plan and a sense of resolve I had not felt in weeks. As I sat in my car in the parking garage, I made several phone calls. First to my bank, where I opened a separate account in my name only and transferred my personal savings that remained separate from our joint accounts. Then to my boss, explaining that I was dealing with a family emergency and might need some flexibility in the coming weeks. Finally, to a locksmith, though I did not yet schedule an appointment. When I returned home that afternoon, I found Eleanor wearing another of my outfits, this time a dress I had been saving for an upcoming client presentation. She was hosting her church group in our living room, serving them tea in my grandmother's china. "Judy, there you are," she said with false cheer. "I was just telling the ladies about our new living arrangement. So wonderful for Aaron to have home-cooked meals every night now, isn't it?" One of the women added, "Eleanor was saying how you are hardly ever home. Such a blessing that she can provide a proper family environment for her son again." I smiled tightly and excused myself. In our bedroom, I found that several of my framed family photos had been removed from the dresser, replaced with pictures of Aaron's childhood and his parents. It was as if they were systematically erasing me from the home I had created. That evening, Aaron informed me that his parents had found a contractor willing to start work on the backyard the following week. When I reminded him that we could not afford such an extensive renovation, he revealed that his father had offered to invest the remaining money from their house sale. "So, they do have money?" I said, connecting the dots. "They just choose to spend it on changing our house rather than finding their own place." "Dad wants to add value to the property," Aaron defended. "It's a smart investment." "No, Aaron, it is not happening. I will not sign any loan documents, and I will not agree to construction on a house that is half mine." His expression darkened. "We will see about that later." I overheard him on the phone with someone, discussing whether a spouse could be compelled to agree to home improvements or if one signature would be sufficient for a home equity line of credit. He was actively looking for ways to circumvent my refusal. That night, I made my decision. This was no longer a home where I was respected or valued. It had become a battleground where I was outnumbered 3-1. I needed to protect myself. And what remained of the dream I had worked so hard to achieve. The following day, I scheduled a follow-up appointment with Sarah, the attorney. This time, I brought printed evidence of the changes Aaron's parents had made to our home without permission, including photos of the wall damage from Harold's television installation and screenshots of their renovation research. "I want to understand all my options," I told Sarah. "If I decide to leave, what happens to the house?" Sarah explained that in our state, the house would be considered marital property, but my significant premarital contribution to the down payment would be taken into account in any division of assets. She advised me to document everything. Take photos of the current state of the house, gather all financial records showing your contributions, and start keeping a journal of incidents. If they damage property or make changes without consent, document it with dates and descriptions. She also confirmed what I had suspected. As the legal co-owner of the house, I had every right to refuse renovations or home equity loans. "They cannot legally proceed with major structural changes without your signature," she assured me. With this knowledge, I began gathering documentation. I took detailed photos of every room in the house, focusing on changes and damages caused by Eleanor and Harold. I collected all financial records, including my pre-marriage bank statements showing the savings I had accumulated for the house, as well as our mortgage documents. Next, I visited my bank again and spoke with a financial advisor about protecting my assets. I ensured my paycheck would now be deposited into my new individual account rather than our joint account. I also removed my name from our joint credit card to prevent being responsible for any new charges Aaron or his parents might make. "You should also check your credit report," the advisor suggested. "Make sure no new accounts have been opened in your name without your knowledge." That advice proved invaluable, as I discovered a credit inquiry from a home improvement store for a new credit card in both my and Aaron's names. Though I had never applied for or authorized such an application, I immediately placed a freeze on my credit to prevent any new accounts from being opened. With my financial protections in place, I moved on to physical security. I rented a small storage unit and began secretly moving my most precious belongings there when no one was home: my grandmother's jewelry that Eleanor had been eyeing, important documents, irreplaceable family photos, and the few kitchen items I had managed to rescue from Eleanor's reorganization. I also contacted a private security company recommended by Sarah. I explained my situation, and they helped me install small, discrete cameras in the common areas of the house. These cameras uploaded footage to a secure cloud server that only I could access. If Aaron or his parents damaged property or removed my belongings, I would have evidence. The most difficult part was maintaining a facade of acceptance while I finalized my plans. I pretended to warm up to the idea of Eleanor and Harold's permanent residence, even sitting through a dinner where they discussed their ideas for improving the master bathroom. "The shower is so outdated," Eleanor complained. "In our old house, we had one of those rainfall shower heads and body jets," Harold added. "I have a guy who could redo the whole thing for a reasonable price. We could take some money from the house fund." I smiled and nodded while mentally adding this conversation to my documentation. The house fund they referred to was our joint savings account, money we had been setting aside for property taxes and emergency repairs. Each night I added to my detailed record of their violations and Aaron's betrayals, the unauthorized use of our credit card, the disposal of my personal property, the planned renovations without my consent, the financial deceptions. The pattern was clear and well documented. During this time, I also reconnected with my support network. I had lunch with Nicole weekly, confiding the latest developments and receiving her unwavering support. I reached out to former colleagues who might help me find independent contract work if needed. I even called my parents, without revealing the full situation, to strengthen the family bonds that had weakened during my marriage. Then came the final catalyst. I returned home early one day to find Eleanor had entered our bedroom closet and was sorting through my remaining clothes, placing many in a donation box. "These are outdated styles, dear," she explained when she saw me standing in the doorway. "I am making room for some new things that would look better on you." Among the items she was discarding was a handmade quilt my grandmother had given me before she passed away. When I rushed to retrieve it, Eleanor held it away from me. "This old thing is falling apart. It is time to let it go." "That was my grandmother's," I said, my voice shaking. "It is not yours to throw away." "Well, this closet is barely big enough for you and Aaron's things, let alone the clothes I need to store. Sacrifices must be made when families live together." I managed to rescue the quilt but later discovered Eleanor had already donated several boxes of my belongings to her church thrift store, including books my father had given me and framed art pieces I had collected over the years. That evening, Harold showed me the construction contract he had printed out for the backyard renovation. "Need your signature here," he said, pointing to a line at the bottom. "Contractor can start Monday." The estimate was for $32,000, far more than we had in savings. When I asked how we were paying for this, Aaron finally admitted they planned to use the home equity line of credit I applied for. "The approval came through today. We just need to sign the final paperwork at the bank tomorrow." I realized they had moved forward with loan applications despite my explicit refusal. The betrayal was complete. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I texted Nicole. "It is time. Can you come get me tomorrow?" That night, I finalized my escape plan. I would leave while everyone was out the next day. Aaron had a morning meeting, Eleanor had her hair appointment, and Harold played golf on Thursdays. I would have approximately 3 hours to gather my remaining essentials and disappear. Before bed, I wrote a brief note that I would leave on the kitchen counter. "I need time to think. Please do not contact me, nothing more, nothing less than." I packed a small overnight bag and hid it in the trunk of my car. As I lay next to Aaron for what I knew would be the last time, he reached for my hand in the darkness. "Things will get better once we finish the renovations," he said sleepily. "You'll see. It will feel like home again." But it would never be my home again. That dream had been systematically dismantled, room by room, boundary by boundary. Tomorrow would be the first day of reclaiming my life and my power. The next morning unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Aaron left for his meeting with a distracted kiss on my cheek. Eleanor departed for her weekly hair appointment, wearing another one of my dresses without asking. Harold loaded his golf clubs into his car, mentioning he might stop for drinks with the boys afterward. As soon as their cars disappeared down the street, I sprang into action. I had already moved most of my irreplaceable items to the storage unit, so what remained was minimal. I packed 2 suitcases with clothes, my laptop and work materials, and the few personal mementos I had managed to hide from Eleanor's purging. Before leaving, I activated the security cameras I had installed and confirmed they were recording properly. I changed all my passwords, removed my personal information from our shared computer, and left my house key on the counter beside the brief note I had prepared. I took one last look around what had once been my dream home, the kitchen Eleanor had rearranged beyond recognition, the living room dominated by Harold's massive television, the garden that would soon be destroyed for their entertainment space. Then I walked out the door, locking it behind me for the last time. Nicole was waiting a block away in her car. "You okay?" she asked as I loaded my suitcases into her trunk. "Not yet," I admitted, "but I will be." We drove to the small, furnished apartment I had rented the previous day, paid for 3 months in advance from my separate savings account. It was nothing like the home I had left behind, a simple one-bedroom with basic furniture, but it was mine alone. No one would rearrange my kitchen, wear my clothes, or make decisions about my space without my consent. For 5 days, I maintained complete silence. I turned off my phone, avoiding all contact with Aaron and his family. I took a week of emergency leave from work, citing personal reasons, and worked remotely from my new apartment. I used this time to finalize my plans with Sarah and prepare the legal documents we would need. Meanwhile, according to my security camera footage, chaos erupted at the house. Aaron called in sick to work and spent hours pacing, alternating between anger and panic as he called my friends and colleagues trying to locate me. Eleanor initially seemed smug, telling Aaron I was throwing a tantrum and would come crawling back when I realized I had nowhere to go. Harold continued with his renovation plans, calling the contractor to confirm their start date despite my absence. He seemed oblivious to the seriousness of the situation, telling Aaron, "She will get over it. Women always do." By day 3, Aaron's panic had intensified. The camera in the living room captured him arguing with his parents for the first time. His voice rose as he questioned whether they had pushed too far. Eleanor responded defensively, reminding him that family comes first and suggesting I was never committed to the marriage if I could walk away so easily. On the morning of the 5th day, I put my plan into action. I had Sarah prepare a comprehensive legal package, including a formal letter establishing my ownership claim to the house based on my premarital contribution to the down payment. A cease and desist order preventing any renovations or alterations to the property without my explicit written consent, documentation of all unauthorized changes already made to the house, including photographic evidence. A formal notice that I had not authorized and would not authorize any loans using the house as collateral. A separate letter outlining my terms for either returning to the house, which would require Eleanor and Harold to move out immediately, or proceeding with divorce and property division. I arranged for these documents to be delivered by a professional courier service, someone who would require a signature and witness the initial reaction. I also timed the delivery for when I knew all 3 of them would be home. According to my security camera feed, at precisely 10 in the morning, the courier arrived at the house. The doorbell camera captured Eleanor answering the door, looking confused at the formal delivery. She signed for the package and took it inside to the kitchen, where Aaron and Harold were having coffee. "What is this?" Aaron asked as Eleanor handed him the thick envelope. "Some legal thing for you and Judy to sign." "Probably for the renovation loan," Harold suggested. Barely looking up from his newspaper, Aaron opened the envelope and began reading the first document. His face paled visibly as he continued to the next page and then the next. Eleanor peered over his shoulder, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock. "What does it say?" Harold demanded when he noticed their reactions. Aaron's voice was hollow as he summarized. "Judy is claiming primary ownership of the house based on her down payment. She is prohibiting any renovations. She says if you do not move out immediately, she will file for divorce and force a sale of the property." Eleanor snatched the papers from him. "She cannot do this. We have rights as residents." "Actually," Aaron said, continuing to read, "according to this, you do not. You haven't established legal residency yet, and as a co-owner, she has the right to refuse you as long-term guests." Harold pounded his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. Call your lawyer. We will fight this." But Aaron had gone completely still, staring at something else in the envelope. He pulled out a USB drive with a note attached, security footage from the past 3 weeks. He plugged it into his laptop and began watching. The cameras had captured everything: Eleanor wearing Judy's clothes without permission, throwing away her personal belongings, making disparaging comments about her when she was not present. Harold damaging walls, planning unauthorized renovations, discussing how to circumvent Judy's refusal to sign loan documents. Their invasion of every private space in the house. And most damning of all, their conversations when they thought no one was listening, revealing their plan to establish permanent residence and gradually take over the home entirely. As Aaron watched the footage, his face cycled through shock, shame, and finally, understanding. The cameras had captured the systematic erasure of his wife from her own home, an erasure he had not only permitted but participated in. The final document in the package was a handwritten letter from me to Aaron. "I built this dream from nothing. I saved for 8 years before I met you. I designed every room in this house to create a home for us. But there is no us anymore. Only you and your parents against me. You have made your choice clear. Now I have made mine. You have 48 hours to respond to my terms before my lawyer files the divorce papers and property claim." The doorbell camera captured what happened next. Aaron slumped into a chair, head in his hands. Eleanor paced frantically, alternating between rage and attempts to minimize the situation. Harold made phone calls, presumably to find legal counsel of his own. Then, just as the courier was leaving, a second vehicle pulled up to the house. It was mine. I had timed my return perfectly, knowing they would be reeling from the legal documents. I walked up the path to my house, no longer afraid or uncertain. Through the security app on my phone, I watched their reactions inside as they noticed my car. "She is back," Harold said, looking out the window. "Good," Eleanor declared. "Now we can talk some sense into her." But Aaron said nothing, still staring at the footage playing on his laptop screen. I unlocked the door with the spare key I had kept and walked into the kitchen. Behind me came two uniformed security officers from the company I had hired, along with Sarah, my attorney. "Hello," I said calmly, looking at each of them in turn. "I believe you received my terms." Eleanor immediately started toward me, her face contorted with anger, but one of the security officers stepped forward, creating a barrier between us. "Mrs. Thompson," Sarah said formally, as discussed in the documents delivered earlier. "You and Mr. Thompson are currently unauthorized occupants of this property. My client, as the primary owner, is requesting your immediate departure." "This is absurd," Harold sputtered. "Aaron, are you going to let them talk to your parents this way?" Aaron finally looked up from the laptop, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked at me, then at his parents, then back to the screen where Eleanor could be seen on camera, telling her friend that Judy was never good enough for Aaron, and how they planned to help him see that once they were settled in permanently. "I think you should go," he said quietly to his parents. "What?" Eleanor gasped. "You heard him," I said. "You have 1 hour to pack your essential belongings. The rest can be arranged later through our attorneys." "You cannot do this," Harold protested. "We have rights." "Actually, sir," one of the security officers interjected, "as you have not established legal residency and are here as guests of the homeowners, you can be asked to leave at any time. If you refuse, it would be considered trespassing." The neighbors had begun to gather outside, drawn by the unusual sight of security vehicles in our normally quiet street. Laura, from next door, stood on her porch, watching with undisguised interest as the drama unfolded. Eleanor made one last desperate attempt. "Aaron, choose right now, us or her." Aaron looked at the laptop screen again, then at me, standing tall and composed after days of planning and years of saving for this home. "I think I have done enough choosing for both of us," he said quietly. "I will help you pack." The security officers accompanied Eleanor and Harold to the guest room to collect their things, ensuring they took only their own belongings. Within the hour, they were loading their suitcases into Harold's car, their faces a mixture of shock and fury. As they pulled away from the curb, the neighbors who had gathered tried to pretend they were not watching, but I could see Laura give me a subtle thumbs up from her yard. The story would be all over the neighborhood by dinner time, but for once, I did not mind being the subject of conversation. With Eleanor and Harold gone, the house felt eerily quiet. Aaron stood in the living room looking lost in what had once been our shared space. "I never saw it," he said, finally breaking the silence. "I never saw what they were doing to you, to us." "You did not want to see it," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "You chose not to." Sarah and the security team had left, but not before helping me change all the locks and security codes. I had legal protection now and the physical means to enforce it. My home was mine again, but the damage done to my marriage remained an open question. "What happens now?" Aaron asked, his voice small. "That depends on you," I said. "I meant what I wrote in those documents. Either your parents find their own place to live permanently, or we proceed with divorce and property division." "They have nowhere to go, Judy." "That is not my problem anymore, Aaron. They sold their house and mismanaged their money. They tried to take over our home and our lives. Those are their choices and their consequences." Aaron spent that night in a hotel, giving me space in the house while he figured things out. The next day, he returned with a proposal. His parents would stay with his sister in another state until they could find an affordable senior apartment. He would help them financially from his personal funds, not our joint accounts. And he wanted to try to repair our marriage if I was willing. "I failed you," he admitted. "I let them steamroll over everything we built together. I do not expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever, but I want to try to make it right." I agreed to consider marriage counseling, but made it clear there would be no second chances if his parents ever attempted to move in again. We would need to rebuild trust slowly, starting with complete financial transparency and respect for each other's boundaries. The physical restoration of our home began immediately. I hired professionals to repair the wall damage from Harold's television installation. I completely redesigned the kitchen that Eleanor had rearranged beyond recognition, creating an even more beautiful and functional space than before. The bedroom returned to a sanctuary with new bedding and curtains to replace what Eleanor had changed. My office was restored to its former state with improved security on my computer and files. Each room that had been invaded was reclaimed and renewed, often better than its original state. The backyard, which Harold had marked for his entertainment complex, became my special project. Instead of concrete and built-in grills, I created a peaceful garden retreat with a small fountain, comfortable seating, and beds of lavender and roses. It became my thinking space, where I could reflect on how close I had come to losing everything I had worked for. Aaron and I attended weekly counseling sessions where we worked through the deep betrayal I had experienced and his failure to protect our partnership. Progress was slow and sometimes painful. There were nights I questioned whether our marriage could or should be saved. The hardest part, I told our therapist during one session, is not knowing if he would make the same choice again if pressured by his family. Aaron struggled to rebuild my trust but showed his commitment through consistent actions rather than just words. He maintained strict boundaries with his parents, including limited contact and no financial support beyond what he could provide from his personal funds without affecting our household. My relationships with friends and colleagues strengthened during this time. Nicole remained my steadfast supporter, coming over to help with home projects and providing a listening ear when I needed to process my feelings. My coworkers, who had seen me withdraw during the invasion, welcomed back my renewed focus and creativity. The neighbors, particularly Laura and James, became closer friends after witnessing the dramatic special delivery day. "We were all rooting for you," Laura confessed over coffee one morning. "Eleanor kept telling everyone she was permanently moving in to fix your home because you were never there. We knew something was wrong." 6 months after the confrontation, our home and lives had transformed. The house once again reflected my vision and our shared tastes, with no trace of Eleanor and Harold's attempted takeover. Aaron and I had established new patterns of communication and respect. Though full trust was still a work in progress, most importantly, I had discovered my own strength and boundaries. I learned that sometimes fighting for what you have built means being willing to walk away from those who do not respect it. I learned that standing up for yourself is not selfish but necessary. One evening, as Aaron and I sat in the garden I had created from what almost became Harold's concrete entertainment zone, he took my hand. "I almost lost everything that matters because I could not see what was happening," he said. "Thank you for fighting for our home when I would not." "I was fighting for more than the house," I replied. "I was fighting for respect, for partnership, for the life we planned together." The garden fountain bubbled peacefully in the background as fireflies began to appear in the twilight. This was home again, not just the structure, but the feeling of safety and belonging I had worked so hard to create. Is there someone in your life who has crossed your boundaries? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who did not respect your space or decisions? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if my story helped you realize the importance of setting boundaries, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about reclaiming your power. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to say no to those who do not respect your yes. Thank you for listening, and I hope my journey gives you courage for your own